Hello and welcome. My name is Linda Henry. I get the pleasure of serving as a CEO of Boston Globe Media, and I am so excited to be joining all of you here today because we are celebrating Tech Week. And the reason why we're celebrating Tech Week is because we know that there is this really dynamic, interesting, world-changing tech community here in Boston, and we're trying to do a better job of telling that story. And so we've been having gatherings and issues and articles and things about it this week. And I've known Rodrigo for a really long time, and I know the incredible ways that he brings all different communities together. So I'm so thrilled to partner with him today on this conversation. And I love the way that the CIC has been bringing people together, been really creating community in Cambridge and Boston and beyond for so long. And so to officially introduce Rodrigo, it's a man with very, very many titles. And his most official title is Chief Marketing and Experience Officer here at CIC. But overall, I just view him as an amazing human being who brings passion, curiosity, intelligence, and incredible energy to everything that he touches. He's an award-winning creative leader and entrepreneur across so many different disciplines. He's an author, a speaker, a diver, a dad, and just really an important part of so many things that he puts his heart into, so many different boards. And so it is a pleasure to share a stage with Rodrigo today.
Wow. Thank you. That was not the plan, so she totally tricked me on that one. That's right.
Good idea for us both to
all right, I'm gonna do my brief introduction to Linda because Linda has kindly introduced me a couple of times on her events, and this is the first time that we have her on our house. So welcome, Linda, to CIC. I moved here from Mexico. I'm half German, half Mexican, about 25 years ago. And I've had the pleasure of meeting an incredible amount of fantastic people, many among you in the crowd. But Linda's in like my top favorite list of people. Not only is she doing amazing work at the Globe and what the Globe does, but also Emmy Award-winning producer, a lot of philanthropic work. And most importantly, she's a human that is really interested in bringing other humans into things that matter. So I am not just honored to be here with you, but also just happy to bring you to our CIC little community.
Very cool space. I saw the room. Hi, do you guys simulcast people? Because your room looks like a lot of fun too.
So this is what we're going to do today. We have about an hour. The arc for this is that Linda is kindly going to introduce our three amazing speakers. Then we have a few questions and topics that we want to start with. We'll have a discussion. She and I will go back and forth. We're going to make it interesting, engaging, and difficult. There should be, if we're not having important and amazing and difficult conversations here, where are we having them? And then we will give you time to think about some of the things that you want to ask and you want to jump in with. And we will have time for that as well. Then we'll wrap up. After this session, there will be another session here. I wanted to take literally just 2 minutes. So for the people that are here for the first time, I just want to tell you one thing. So CIC, Cambridge Innovation Center originally, what we do is we build centers just like this one in different parts of the world to bring startups, communities, companies, organizations, both here, Europe, and Asia. And I just wanted to give you a quick show. So these are some of the places where we are. Venture Cafe was an initiative started by CIC many years ago that brings together about 3,500 people every week in 11 cities around the world. So on Thursday, today, in 11 cities around the world, we have an amazing set of directors here of all these different cities. That's happening according to their own time zone in Japan, in Mexico, and Europe, etc. And we basically, our work is basically to do this. We set up the best possible space for innovators to come, grow, scale their companies. Dharmesh, if you know him, he started here, desk of one, and then HubSpot turned into what it is today. And this is basically what we do. This is what we do for folks like you. The last thing I want to say is after this event, there's going to be another session, and I'll come to that when we are done. Okay? With that, we're going to start. So
Why don't you guys each introduce yourself, your name, your company, and your position?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Lampa. I'm the Senior Manager of U.S. Commercial Business Development at Riverlane. Riverlane is a quantum computing company. So Riverlane mostly focuses on making the operating system for quantum computing to make quantum computing accessible sooner through error correction.
Hi everyone, I'm David Zhang. I'm the head of bioengineering at Oddity Labs. Oddity itself is a consumer tech platform, but at Oddity Labs, we basically use AI and biotechnology to find new molecules for the beauty and wellness category.
So just so you know, we have mics up here, so you will hear us in the back. We'll speak a little bit louder.
Hi, Anna Maikes. I'm the CEO and founder of Neuroelectrics, and some of you may not recognize me, but you will recognize me if I do this, because nowadays people only recognize me if I wear my cap, which is a non-invasive brain stimulation technology. And now a lot of you say, "Oh, it's the one with the cap," so that's me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'm going to kick us off, and so I'm going to start with the one with the cap. And so we are talking about AI in every business, whether you're in a 150-year-old business like I am, or if you're in a brand new startup. We're all talking about AI. And so I wanted to start first with what larger scale problem are you looking at, and then what role do you see AI in achieving your solving of those problems?
So I have the pleasure and the challenge of working in the most sophisticated, most complex part of our body, which is the brain. And if I wear my cap right now and I show you my brain in real life, which I'm going to do, of course, that's the only reason why Rodrigo here. So this is my brain right now. This is the electrical activity on my brain. Why is this relevant to AI? There are 100 billion neurons in my brain right now communicated, 10,000 connections at a second of a time in every neuron. It's just impossible. We don't know how the brain works. So we have been obsessed at our company on decoding how the brain works from an electric perspective and how to stimulate the brain with electricity to help patients suffering from epilepsy, depression, or Alzheimer's. And I have to tell you, as much as we are working and we are in 2 FDA pivotal trials, we are advancing a lot, we yet don't know. So I'm very hopeful to AI because I think there are connections and things that neither the naked eye, neither our developed technologies will never get. So I hope we can develop biomarkers to find Alzheimer's, even you develop a symptom, even before it's too late. So I think it's going to be a revolution in neuroscience for sure, because we need as much help as we can get to help so many millions of patients. So I'm very hopeful.
Thank you, Anna. David?
Yeah, so we're in the beauty and wellness space. We're actually a bunch of scientists doing beauty. So we often get the question, what are you guys doing? Why are you doing that? So I think the probably not so dirty truth of the beauty industry now is that it's basically the same ingredients that have been used over and over again for many, many years. Things are just remixed, rehashed, reformulated, and then remarketed with brand new labels, and then everyone starts buying it. We spend so much money on marketing, right? And then you and I, we end up buying these products that oftentimes under-deliver, but overpromise. And so I think, especially for us, looking from a scientific perspective, the question is always why? Like, why do we always fall for these marketing traps? But I think the thing is, consumers, like, we're not stupid, right? But the challenge is that those are the only options out there. And that's the problem we're trying to solve with AI. So we're using AI to really supercharge discovery of new molecules that we can fit into these beauty and wellness products to improve things like skincare, hair thinning, everything in that category.
So, Michelle, let's go to you. Your company is slightly different in the sense of where it's focusing on, and we should definitely talk about where AI is today and the discussion happening in AI today in the media, and where do you see your company fitting in?
Sure. So we actually started off as an algorithms company. So to Anna's point, and even to David's point, them talking about like the amount of data that is consumed, the amount of data that you actually receive from all those neurotransmitters in the brain, from all the various different type of molecules, break that down a little bit more to the micromolecules, how they interact, how they react. Unfortunately, your phone, your laptops, the fastest supercomputer that exists today on this planet can only do so much. There's only so much computing power that is capable on the hardware that exists today. And so therefore, there is the next generation, which is basically quantum computing. We know the amount of data that exists in the world is a lot, quite a bit. And if you were to try to put it all at the same time, turn it all on your phone would probably burn up, or it would just stop working and just reset. That's literally the problem that we're seeing. So if we were to do like a biopharmaceutical problem, right? Then we wanted to see, okay, we want to cure a specific type of cancer and go from idea all the way to clinical trial, human clinical trial, right? You're not just talking about the drug itself on how it's going to interact with the cancer cells. You're also talking about how it's supposed to interact with the body, how each and every one of us have our own makeup and biomarkers that you talked about as well, how it interacts, how it metabolizes drugs differently. But not only that, how it interacts with the capsule itself. And so all those reactions are all added and done at the exact same time. In classical computing right now, it's all in a process, right? It's like, okay, we're gonna try this, then we're gonna try this, we're gonna try this. In quantum computing, because we use quantum mechanics and quantum physics, like superposition and entanglement, in which it's not just 0 or 1, it's everything 0 and 1 and everything in between, all done at the exact same time. You're talking about something that could be done in microseconds versus 9,000 years on the fastest supercomputer that exists today. So that's some of the stuff that we're working on. To manage expectations, though, we are not there yet. We don't have a quantum computer.
I think it was a Marvel.
Yeah, just like let's put in the Marvel piece. Ant-Man doesn't exist yet, but one of the things that Riverlane is doing is error correction, as I mentioned earlier, and it's because we're talking about quantum bits. Quantum is the manipulation of atomic and subatomic particles, and that takes a lot. There's a lot of science that goes into it, and because of that, they're more prone to errors. And so our software actually works with various different quantum computing hardware companies to essentially enable them to scale building up and getting as many logical qubits as possible as opposed to as many qubits as possible. Because as we know, it can affect life or death for a lot of people.
I think that that's fascinating, and the depth at which your understanding is really interesting. And one of the things that's always inspiring is sort of why people try to take on, you guys are taking on really hard problems. So, and I want to start with you. What inspired you to tackle this aspect of understanding the brain?
Well, I think it may sound a bit controversial being in Boston, which I am totally in love in Boston. I feel it like at home. I know Barcelona is beautiful and Boston is super interesting. Sorry.
Sister cities.
Jokes
Beautiful in its
aside.
own way.
So, I think that, we've done so much in Boston in the bio, and Henry Termeer was my mentor when I came to Boston. So I totally acknowledge the effort. But I think that today, for patients that are suffering, we have to do more. And I think it's the duty of innovators and entrepreneurs to keep on, cracking, how the brain works. So we were inspired because my co-founder is a physicist and a mathematician. So we came from a different approach to brain stimulation, and it's just treating the brain as an electrical kind of circuitry system and decoding it. So I think that's the novelty. So we are driven from, for really decoding the brain from an electric perspective, but also I think our passion and determination to help patients and take it to the next level, which is, going through the FDA, doing clinical trials, which I tell you that for an entrepreneur are hard and, very hard to implement.
What's the clinical trial that you're doing now, and what's the biggest complication?
So we are doing 2 trials, one in epilepsy and the other in depression. And I just came from UMass, from talking from a neurologist at the medical school. We have Boston Children's, Beth Israel. And I don't know, but there are so many competing trials. It's just, I thought that our technology, non-invasive, was going to be put out there and there will be a lineup of patients signing up. And I'm shocked because I have the money. We had a Series A with a lot of money from Boston investors. We have all these level 3, level 4, John Hopkins, Mayo hospitals, and now the patients are so hard to find. So isn't that frustrating that you really are putting, so as being my first trial, but the role of an entrepreneur is not to complain. So
Speaking of being an entrepreneur, you have a story that we're going to try to get you to share about getting the award of Entrepreneur of the Year
by Goldman
by
Sachs.
Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, that was interesting. So I think that we got this Goldman Sachs Entrepreneur of the Year, and I was, being used to Boston and the science, being around bankers for a whole weekend was a life-changing experience.
Paint the picture for us. You're around bankers. How did that go?
It was very humble, as you can imagine. It was in Sonoma, a weekend on this beautiful hotel. But jokes aside, I think that the entrepreneurs that we were gathered around Goldman Sachs in Sonoma was great. And when you read stories about Moderna and how all these banks helped to, build these companies. On the other, and jokes aside, I think that we entrepreneurs need investment and money to grow our companies. So I think it's great that these big banks are paying attention very early to the entrepreneurs. And I really do a big shout out to diversity in tech and in entrepreneurship. I think we need more women like Michelle or Linda, who are CEOs, and more diversity in general. So I think that was a great recognition, not only for Neuroelectrics, but also for being a woman entrepreneur. So encourage your daughters to really, be entrepreneurs and scientists, because we need more.
David, so bring us to what was the genesis of your interest and passion in what you're doing now?
Yeah, so to make a long story short, our moms were actually one of the original inspirations behind, at that point we were called Revela, now we've been acquired by Oddity. But my co-founders, Evan, Avi, myself, we spent all our lives doing biotech. So I was developing these next generation cancer vaccines, these new therapeutics. And when COVID happened and everything shut down and we were all sent home, love those times, we had a lot of conversations at McDonald's because that was the only place that was open. And we got talking about, wow, we're seeing all these really cool technologies, right? Like sequencing, AI, robotics, synthetic biology, they're making all these big impacts in pharma. But there's all these other fields out there that haven't really seen any of that innovation, especially in beauty and wellness, where where all the problems are, where all these pain points are, but then you don't really have the tools to find them. And at that point, hair thinning was really top of mind because our moms were getting older and they were starting to lose a little bit of hair. And we also had COVID hair loss. And so that's two kind of came together, and that's how we got off the ground at the very beginning.
Wow. Michelle, you've done several working on different companies. What about quantum really gets you excited?
I don't even know how to answer that question.
Or you can answer it and not answer it. Answer it and not answer
Yeah,
it.
right, but it's all the same, right? It all works. And I mean, so I grew up not having any engineers in my family, and it was actually really hard getting into tech. I remember going to Artisans Asylum in Somerville, basically being like,
Yeah.
what does it mean to actually go into tech? Like, I went to Hack Night, started soldering. I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know why I was doing it, but I was there from 6 to midnight, and I don't know why. And somehow I just kept asking questions, and I ended up going to a web development boot camp called Launch Academy. And they introduced me to object-oriented programming. It completely destroyed my world. And it was mostly because of the fact that it made me think of things like building on top of like objects one at a time. And somehow getting into web development, it was the hardest thing I ever did. I ended up realizing I didn't want to be an engineer, but that's only because it was like, this is all like applications on stuff that already exists. And somehow I ending up like for a laser company that used lasers to basically, extract atoms from certain types of elements to do quantum applications. We're not going to go into that, but essentially it basically everyone that's in quantum is usually really obsessed with learning more. And considering the fact that I had not come from physics or mathematics background, liberal arts, woo woo, it actually opens your mind to like being part of that diverse voice that adds in like, okay, did you ever think of this way? Did you ever think of marketing it this way? Or did you ever think of talking about it this way? Or thinking about it in a different way? And it's been a very awesome experience of learning with all the scientists, everyone that's in this ecosystem, because we're all basically in level playing field. You have everyone from Google, IBM, to even your small startups like Quora and Pascal, basically all on the same level playing field because no one has figured it out yet. And so you still have that collaborative nature of wanting to work together. And that's what gets me going at least. I don't know what gets you guys going, but that's
We'll get
how
to
I got there.
Fantastic. By the way, we were just at a lunch with the whole team, the Boston Globe, several who are back there. So Boston Globe. Woo. So part of the tech week is to come with 50 top tech folks in Boston. That's why we have some of these magazines here. But we're having a conversation about how important is the storytelling aspect of all of the incredible things that happen in Massachusetts, not just Boston, not just Kendall Square, but in our state. And storytelling is sort of like the way that we actually make it also a reality. So we'll come back to that for a second. Now, all of the questions so far have been sort of softballs. So here comes the first one. Yeah, this is like, oh yeah, great. So a lot of things happening on AI, whether it's on the software side, folks' discussions on the hardware side. So my question to you is, on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being I absolutely have no idea, 10 being I have absolutely perfect clarity, how do you think AI will really affect your industry in the next 5 to 10 years? How well do you understand how it will change your industry? Michelle.
Okay, it's between an 8 and a 10. And that's mostly because, how many of you have used ChatGPT? Right? Yes. And it's been really helpful in explaining things in certain ways, right? And it's for us in quantum, it is especially really difficult for marketing and explaining certain things. So it's been really helpful on that end. Another way that AI has been really helpful is it's actually exposing the certain flaws in existing hardware and bringing a major focus, quantum, into light. Quantum, I guess that was like a pun, but not really. Only those that get it. Sorry. So quantum computing brings it into the limelight, which basically means that, there is going to be more need into hardware focus. And right now everyone's into like TikTok and like all that stuff. That's great, but that's applications on top of existing hardware. We need more people who are really like focused in on that. Mm-hmm. That's where I think AI is actually going to have a major impact.
David, from 1 to 10, 1, you totally have no idea how AI will change your field. 10, you have perfect clarity. Where are you?
I'm gonna go with a 5.
Yes?
I have a sense, but I could also be completely wrong. Which I guess somewhat related.
Where do you think you might be wrong?
So for us, because we make products, we make beauty products, wellness products, I'm fairly confident we can do a lot better than what's currently out there. So I think AI can help supercharge how we find new things, how we bring those things to market, definitely. But on the other side of things, like how is that going to change the customer experience? And we're already seeing that right now, right? We're seeing ads made by AI. I don't know if you guys saw the latest Coca-Cola commercials made using AI. It was really fantastic. How we interact with products, the internet, how we learn about different products, I think that's completely going to change. And I'm not 100% sure exactly how that'll change, whether for the good or for the worse.
Okay. Anna.
I'm in the upper, I would say 12. Because let me tell you how I see it. I mean, the future for my company, I think is going to be that a patient, let's say with Alzheimer's or depression, you choose, goes home, wears this device, has like a real-time brain scan of the, EEG or electrical activity. Then this is uploaded on the cloud where you have a neurotwin or digital copy of your brain, a computational model which we are building. And then it will really see how your brain is and then personalize what kind of electrical stimulation or therapy you need at that particular moment. And that should be done in seconds. And then you will be deliver your stimulation, feel better, and then gather, your feedback data. Right now, that process is so complex. If I would have your quantum computing, that we could do this in seconds. But I think there is no chance we can do that without the help of AI, because this is scanning brains, uploading into a digital brain, computing the perfect solution for your brain, for your pathology, and then bringing it down and reassess constantly. So that's why I say that at 12, because it's so complex and we know so little, that I think is going to have a tremendous impact.
Rodrigo, I'm going to answer that. I'm going to say that, so at Boston Globe Media, I wish we were 12, but I'm with David on a 5. And here's why. It's like we have imaginations and sort of a little bit more than imaginations in terms of ideas of how this can change so many different aspects of how we do what we do every day. And all of us have legal departments, all of us have HR. We all sort of know how it's going to be helpful, how people are going to be further enabled, but we don't fully know yet. We sort of have an idea of what's coming, and we're sort of headed on that path, which is why I'd say I'm a 5 there. And in terms of reporting, the gathering journalistic thing, there's a conversation that some people have that AI, probably less so in this room, but is AI good or bad? Is it evil? Is it awesome? And we're trying to have the conversation that it is. It is. It's here. It is. And whether it's good or bad, that's not really the question. It's how are we using it? And I promise I do more than watch Marvel movies because I'm making a second reference. I have children, and what we're trying to say is that for a journalist, like this could be that you are Tony Stark, and this is the AI is your Iron Man suit that you put on, and you're able to do so much more with what you have, but you still need a human at the core of that. You still need that human gathering the original data, doing the research, verifying things, but you're copying, getting your notes out into a form and whatnot. So which is why I don't know if I'm 5 or 6, but I'm
Close
not.
to that.
I believe where David is.
Before we go to the next question, so just a show of hands, how many of you are in the neutral to somewhat positive on AI in the next decade? Then we'll do some other things. So I'm gonna tell you the options first before you start voting. You always want to know the spectrum. So neutral, positive, then very, very positive, and then more on the negative. So something in between, something very positive, something more on the negative side. So neutral, positive.
Meaning
Show of
you
hands.
understand where it's going?
Yeah, and you understand what's going on and the implications, and we're going to be able to control it, et cetera. All right, now very, very positive. Okay, like another turn, like more on the negative side. Okay, the smaller side. Okay. All right, good. We'll open up, start getting your questions ready. We have three more questions we're going to go around.
Here we go. Talk about AI and equity.
Yeah.
I think kind of like part of it where your people might be negative on it is this idea of AI and equity. And we sort of have seen bias worked into banks and other areas. What are your thoughts in terms of that going forward?
Sorry. So AI, right, is just a tool. It's the same as all technologies. They're all tools built to, technology, right? They're all tools for helping us in our everyday lives. AI is nothing different. The difference is AI is run on data sets, right? And all the data sets that exist right now are from people like ourselves who like upvoted on Yelp and Facebook and Twitter and whatever. And it basically said, this is what we all like, this is what we don't like. But for equity wise, right, there are certain people who don't have access to phones, don't have access to computers still. I work with a friend that's in Dakar, and he is just focused on helping big companies like IBM or and Google essentially identify ways to introduce their technological applications to Africa, right? And it's like, or African like countries in different areas. And so there's still quite a bit of this world that don't have access to the applications and technology that we have. And so what we need to be worried about is mostly the data sets that are in there, but not only that, educating people to understand that all of AI, all the output comes from the assessment of the data sets. So the question isn't about the answer, it's about where, or the blueprint that actually got you to that answer and conclusion.
I agree that I feel like the data is absolutely the most important part. And I think it's also very context dependent. And so I always worry that we're lumping AI into this just one big nasty thing when it's actually very complicated and it's very context dependent. So for us, we're going about trying to find new products. The data sets that we use are from biological data sets, they're chemical data sets. And I would argue a lot of those data sets, like they're just not big enough to actually train a lot of these models to really do anything yet. And we're starting to do just some of that, like the protein database, and AlphaFold is probably the first big advancement in that space in biology, but in chemistry, we don't really know how all these different chemicals are interacting with different parts of our body at a super granular level that we can use to train a lot of these large models. So I think on the equity part, I feel like it's very context dependent. For us, we try to gather as much data as possible using primary cells from as many people as possible, but it's very different versus having all this data around and training models like ChatGPT.
Anna?
Well, I think I agree, but I also think that we will see, I heard of a company in Canada that is doing like bias AI, like an organization that is really trying to spot bias in those data sets. So I hope that we will get organized in a way in which we can also, because there will be multiple truths, right, based on where the data sets are coming from, right? But I hope there will be, as a society, we'll be able to counteract and really spot the light on the things that we think are not working correctly. So, I mean, when Elon Musk started to work on Neuralink, everybody thought that he's going to open our brains and read our minds, and that doesn't happen, right? So I think that every time a new wave of technology comes, there is a lot of concern, but I think that, it's also up to the communities to really make sure that we are spotting on the things that are wrong about the technology, right?
One of the CEOs that we had lunch with today said that it's sort of saying, yes, it's the data, but it's a lot easier if it's AI because you can find it, right? Like you can sort of source it out and see where that bias is coming from and then fix it as opposed to humans. It's a little bit harder.
Get your questions ready. So Anna, you spent 40% of your time in Barcelona with your team. How big is your team in Barcelona?
Almost 100 or so,
And here?
like 20 or so.
Okay. So you spent most of your time here and then time in Barcelona. There's huge regulation discussions happening in Europe. Where do you see, Italy saying, are we going to ban things like ChatGPT? Can you even ban it? I don't even know how you do that. But so how do you see the distinction in the regulatory sphere, the Europe side and the US side, as an entrepreneur that is coming back and forth almost every month?
Well, I travel all around the globe, and this is a question also for Linda because it's the Tech Week. But we were called, and Ramses is here, all the BCI companies in the United States were called for the government to see for export control, right? And we were all called into Washington to describe what we were doing. And it's really kind of scary because you see these governments on the technological sovereignty, trying to push borders up. But this is happening in Europe, it's happening in the US, and it's happening in Asia, right? So it's not American phenomena. And as an entrepreneur, you have maybe 30 nationalities in your workforce, and you like this free will of people. And I want to help patients in depression in Asia, in the US, and in Europe. So it's challenging because when given as an entrepreneur, when the walls will come up, we'll have to take decisions on where we base our companies and where we stay. Now we are kind of global, right? So I think it's a risk for the entrepreneurs as well, all these, regulation and controls. And I see that, the countries that are more restricted, they will see also a flow of people flying to other territories where we can do our job in the best condition. I will never give up talent, by no means. So, our companies are made of good people. So, and that's why Boston is such a fantastic place, right? Because, so we'll see. I don't know what you think it's Tech Week of this technological sovereignty, right?
Yeah, I think people in this room would agree. It's hard. It will be very hard to regulate this. They weren't able to do it with social media or anything else. I don't know why. This, which is so much harder, they'll be able to do it with.
All right, so we're going to open up for a few questions. I see already like several hands. Wow, 10 hands going. Go. Do you want to start over there in the middle, and then we'll go around, please? Yeah, start, and then maybe the woman behind you. Go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I have a lot of teacher friends that are very I have a lot of teacher friends who are really concerned about AI, and where do you think that's going to go? In college essays and papers, kids suddenly
Yeah.
couldn't write anything.
I mean, my personal opinion that I'll give to this is we had similar discussions with computers. Like, are we going to need teachers anymore? And now, in my kids are in public school, and the teachers are starting to ask them to learn how to use a new technology to do better in their research, in the right conditions, in the research, in their essays, in their writing. So my personal thought is that specifically in education, there's going to be a time of turbulence. We're going to have to set some guidelines, but it's going to become a productivity and a research enriching tool. Let's have an open discussion.
About when you were doing your math, and I don't know if you guys had the same teacher that I did, why do I have to memorize this particular thing? And they said, well, you're not always going to have a calculator in your pocket. We all have calculators in our pockets. And so it's one of those things, it's like you need, like, I think that people are teaching the basics, but teaching kids, like you said, how to use it, when to use it, that teachers, it is, it's like you can't make it go away. It's part of kids' lives. And so teaching them to use it in ways that is productive, I think is important.
That's right. Yeah. So, go ahead, gentleman in the white shirt.
I have not exactly the same question, but my question is, what do you think the implications of AI would be on the education of people?
Thoughts, but education of people are like training.
As opposed to
Yeah.
education juniors as
Yeah.
but
Thoughts?
I mean, communication overall, I feel like it'll help because we're in this weird spot, right? So when I was growing up, I remember learning the Dewey Decimal System for like looking up library books, right? And understanding when the internet and dial-up came up in AOL and You've Got Mail came out. That was really awesome. Mostly because of the fact that it was like we understood the grit, the challenges of actually doing the Dewey Decimal System, and then finding that the book isn't even there and it was like moved somewhere else. The World Wide Web was actually really awesome because it was like, wait, I can just ask Jeeves and an answer will come out. That's amazing, right? The future generations and the existing generations right now, they have been born into this. These tools already exist. This already is there. There is no reason why. And that's, I think, to your question, even about education, we need to go back to the basics. What are we actually trying to teach the kids? Problem solving, like creativity, going back to the liberal arts mentality to see things beyond just, okay, well, we're going to use these tools because it makes it easier. Makes it easier for who? Probably for us because we understood how hard it was before, but for them, this is going to be the new, like, let's start off from here.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Please go ahead.
I'm very pro AI, but this is a dark question. So the Industrial Revolution for Britain was 300 years. For China, it was maybe 40 years. And Sam Altman from OpenAI CEO made a comment recently that what really strikes him about AI is it's going to happen over the next 10 years. And so I'm really interested how you see that. I see it similar to Sam Altman. I'm curious.
I agree. I think it'll happen super quickly, and especially the current timing with the election coming up. I think that's why it's so everyone's talking about it, which I think is the most important part, that we're all talking about it, right?
We're talking about it, and his concern, of course, is humanity has never dealt with change at this pace. And so,
No,
so that's
agree.
the darkness to it, but the positive is there's so much opportunity.
So one question is, for those of you who has been using language models in general without calling it AI for more than a year. So you have like 30 people that here that in a way have been using language models for a long time. So there is also sort of a if you like, a public rebirth of AI and language models. But many of us have been using some of those techniques and tools for a while. So I think there's, it's 10 years from now on, but it's also the last 20 years folks have been using language models for a long time. We just it wasn't in the newspaper, it wasn't on, on TikTok.
Just a follow-up question to that one, based on Yuval Harari's book.
So that they can hear you.
Yuval Noah Harari wrote the book on 21 lessons for the 21st century, and he's really worried about the billions of jobs that may suddenly go. Linda, you might have a real perspective. If AI is suddenly writing many of the articles and you need 1/10 of the staff, how do we help society deal with that is one of the big challenges that he was very concerned about.
I think it's concerning. I think that, but you will still need a lawyer, even though a lot of the paralegal work can be done quickly, right? You still need some HR people, even though you can get your benefits sort of customized and planned. So I think that you're right in that you're still going to need humans on some aspects of it, sort of doing that final check, doing that thing, but each human is going to be able to be a lot more productive. And so just in the same way that computers put a lot of people out of work, I think that there are new jobs that are going to be opening up, and are we as a society training and preparing and educating people in the right way to be able to be that much more productive, and do they know the fundamentals of what we want them to, of what they need to learn to survive?
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Well, you mentioned lawyers. I'm a lawyer.
Welcome.
And I'm very, very concerned, I don't know whether rightly so or wrongly so, about juries.
Juries, yeah.
Juries, the foundation of our society practically. And second guessing juries, sneaking into AI as a jury member, judge using AI. Where does it begin? Where does it end?
Fantastic question. Any other legal lawyers, experts that you want to jump in and have a conversation about that? Anyone else have a thought on that? Yeah.
I would just say, there's a lot of work at Google being done on explainable AI, the idea that you can then open up the black box and you can detect things. And the idea is that, is this just pointing out to us, what's the foundation of the ability to look into the judge's mind? Whereas now you can have more open and transparent systems where you can re-examine what's there. It's going to take a while to get to that same level, but at least there's a possibility of a different kind of dialogue that can happen because of it.
Who gets executed before you get there?
Yeah, nobody.
Yeah, and some of these questions are really important, and they were also brought up with the advent of the internet. I remember seeing an article that talked about the role of the judicial system and juries at the moment that every juror would have access to the internet at any moment. And it would change everything. And yeah, sure it has. And some things have gone wrong, some things have gone right. So they're very relevant questions. Cynthia, you had a question.
Yeah, so both of these questions really have me thinking that they just go back to ethical concerns. So if we're thinking back to earlier this year when AI generated art was the thing, so many people were excited, but so many artists in my community were like, this is ripping off artists' work. How are we keeping this in check? And so that's one example, but another example would be the case of the juries. And so similarly, I also saw an article this week from the New York Times that raised just a thought of, do we consider the ethics of AI now, or is it something, we'll think about it later? And so I kind of want y'all's opinions on that.
Yeah, I have been involved in the neuroscience side in neuroethics for a long time. And there was, Harvard has a neuroethics, and I've been involved in many, many discussions. And you're totally right. You have to talk about ethics like 20 years or 10 years, before the technology. You have to set up the ground, right? And I think that when I met ethicists, which are usually academics, they asked me questions I never thought as a technology developer. So I think it's right on spot that they were asking, okay, Anna, you're doing these FDA trials with patients, but is the identity of your patient or the autonomy or, being altered by your device? And the FDA is not asking me that. It's just asking me if I reduce seizures so there are a lot of questions, right? or the bias on how many women and of what color are included in your trials. I mean, all these biases that we discuss. It's true.
And even our AI-based language models admit that they have their own biases because of the people who develop them. And so I guess ultimately it goes back to, are ethical concerns like something that AI developers need to be considering before they make the thing, or should that be someone on their team?
I think there should be a set of guidelines. I mean, I don't know whether it's regulation or guidelines, but at some point there are some principles in the development of these AI tools that somebody has to consider, especially the developers, right? And identify there is a bias here or this is wrongly done. And I think that honestly, I think that the ethical part, people underestimate how relevant it is, because some of us, we are not even thinking about the questions that they're raising. And I think we should at least be aware.
No, I think so. One other element before I go to more questions is this timeline, right? So you bring up how we were talking about art developed by AI and is it true, is it not, et cetera. But 18 months ago, we were like talking about NFTs. How ridiculous. Nobody has talked about NFTs anymore. Like NFTs suddenly disappeared.
AI generated poetry, stories,
Yes,
essays.
absolutely. And some creatives are using, there was a great session at TED, the conference in Vancouver this year, where there were a series of artists saying how are they leveraging opportunities of AI, things that they were never able to do before, which is sort of really empowering. Please.
So
Just speak up so we
I
can hear
think
you.
I'm an AI maximalist, and I believe that we lived in age of search. We live in an age of creation, and almost infinite creation. And I feel like anyone can just type a text prompt, and in a couple of years we'll be able to produce a whole Marvel or Pixar level movie. And so with the proliferation of media that can be produced by even like a 5-year-old, what do you feel like the role of censoring AI, or kind of right now it's censoring a lot of like nude imagery, or just like or even just like for celebrities they put their digital entity out there so you can kind of mimic celebrities and have their digital entity, but like what do you feel like the role of kind of censorship or like what media shouldn't be produced?
So let me turn it back to you if I may. So the question is, okay, who's going to censor?
Yeah.
So, how many of you think that Congress should take a very strong, hands down, we're going to set some guidelines on censorship the next year? Small group. How many of you think the companies themselves need to have someone that will create some guidelines on some censorship? Okay, that's bigger. So you think they should, whether they will or not, that's a different story. How many of you think do you think it should be, do we need a new nonprofit? Do we need a new organization setup system that needs to be accountable but not part of the business interest that could set some guidelines? Remember when Wikipedia started, there was this whole discussion like itself can never regulate to have good quality, content. Yeah, you won't trust everything that is there, but for the most part, they figure out a way. How many of you think it should be a new type of body with social community participation? Okay, because the question is, who should do it? And the other is, what can they regulate, right? Like Linda was posting, it's not stopping. So who should do it?
Rodrigo should do it.
Oh boy, we are in for a
Rodrigo.
starts with a big party. Please, go ahead.
I was recently in an editorial board of a American Heart Association, and they said that 20 articles that were submitted were already done by AI. They discovered that based on the references that were, completely constructed. What do you think about that? How do we control science in terms of accepting these papers?
I think that's a really, really, really important point. And it's a challenge that is very prevalent, right? There's so much misinformation out there, especially when the data is so available all around. I don't really have the best answer for that, but I feel like there needs to be more technologies that's able to really validate, to proofread. Just as an analogy, actually, when your cells replicate, right, your DNA replicates. There's a reason why it does it at such a high fidelity, and it's because it has these proofreading mechanisms. And so I feel like that's a really important piece of a lot of AI technologies that's still missing.
Thoughts on the science side, the research side? Like, how do you are you more concerned now that some of the literature that you read or your team receives may not be actually factual, or no?
I'm not sure. Scientists publish usually the good results and not the bad ones, so there is a bias there already, right?
The question, is it factual or is it generated by AI? Like, what's the concern? Like, is it,
Great point.
is the concern that it's not done well, or that the person didn't spend as much time doing it?
I think it's fabrication of data. That's the most
Fabrication of
urgent
data. So the
concern.
data itself that it's reporting on
That's the
is
most
not accurate.
important concern.
Yep.
That's an issue.
As a reviewer, yeah.
We're probably going to do 2 or 3 more, please. And I will come back to you. I know you had your hand first, please.
My name is Frank Gillette. An observation and a discussion point. A lot of technologies are not necessarily deterministic. That is, they don't have structure. Nuclear power, for example, is something that has a lot of prerequisites in it. Most technology don't. However, the way it's initially implemented and structured does set things in stone in ways that's very hard to change. The example would be social media, where it's very hard to undo who owns the information and who benefits from the information of social media when you can't go make Facebook rewrite its platform. So with AI, what are the leverage points that if we could influence them at the beginning will give us flexibility and to figure these problems out as we go downstream?
Super easy question.
No, I saved it up.
When the first discussion at TED this year was Greg Brockman, if you don't know, one of the co-founders of OpenAI. And I don't agree with the way that he described things, but that's a different discussion for later with a glass of wine. But well, the point that he was said is like, look, there were basically, for all the companies that have big efforts in tech and AI, there were 2 routes, 2 main routes. One is keep doing things internally and try to get them advanced as much as possible. And then at some point in the future, figure out it's ready to be released. Or release a very early version and get the input of many people to help get it better. And we picked this one. He's like, I'm not sure if it's right or not, but we picked the one that is get it quickly out, get many versions out, and get a lot of people participating and feeding it and trying to help it make it better. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but that was basically the point he was making, is in order to make it less deterministic, more flexible, is get as many possible cases early on so that it opens a series of possibilities with its limitations.
So my question is at the societal level. How do you think about designing social media so that individuals who contribute benefit, right? You can't retrofit that now.
Yeah.
But so we face some of the same questions in AI. What do we need to build in now to create flexibility? And how do we do that institutionally? Nonprofit, international cooperation? I don't know.
I think that is.
I don't have the answer.
That's probably, we should once we should keep that ongoing for the discussion. That's a very good point. One last one, and then we're gonna have another question, last question for our panelists, please.
Linda, we've talked about different checks and balances on these forces that are acting in development. You know, there's government, there's corporate, there's nonprofit, but the media also acts as a check and a balance within this technological development. So how do you, as somebody running a media company, balance promoting awesome developments that inventors and business leaders are doing, and also think about the risks, such as quantum computing potentially having a massive impact on encryption? And how do you think about these stories in, putting them side by side, or is it a cycle?
Look, when I put myself at a 5, it was because there are some things that I can understand in terms of like how things are working, but am I worried for our industry in terms of people saying, what happened with that missing boy on Castle Island into AI and getting a response that's from an LLM that's crawling our research and original reporting and summarizing it, right? So I don't know if I fully understand your question, but in terms of there are things that we can do in terms of preparing the people that work at our organization and enabling our journalists to do more. But is it something that is a fundamental threat potential to our industry? I would say, yeah, it's a fundamental threat to a lot of ways that people do business. But, you know, again, I said I work at a 150-year-old company that's had to adapt to a lot of really big changes along the way. And so it's us being innovative, you know, and smart and trying and open and looking at new things. But so the answer, I guess, is we are trying, and I'm very concerned. I don't know I'm amazed that you're at a 12 because I honestly don't know the way that it's going to change people's behaviors and how they consume news. Do they go to a GPT, as any form of an LLM to get information first, or do they go to their trusted source? To what extent can we block ourselves, and to what degree for us, a part of our thinking is, you know, what it's not going to do is breaking news. So, you know, breaking news, things as it happen, an LLM is going to be less likely to sort of have answers sooner. And so I don't know. These are some of the things that we're thinking about. If you're producing long form magazine articles, it's pretty easy to crawl and summarize, right? And so how do we adapt? And just like every technology that comes around that we have to think and adapt to, it's going to be really hard.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of industries like mine that have been around that are going to have to try, and hopefully we make it.
Before we go to the last question to our panelists, how many of you are using some form of ChatGPT, you know, Bard, like just some of it, you know, once a week in your job where you didn't do it before? So like 70, 80%. Okay. Should we, is that an amazing question and a short one?
Yes.
Go. Go. You get the last one.
One through line that I'm seeing on this discussion is the question of intellectual property, whether it is in research, cosmetics, arts, law. Eventually, who owns the inputs and who owns the output? Is it what the AI is powered by, or is it who ends up using the output? I wondered in all your fields what your take was on it, or how you think you have to protect yourself from it.
Michelle, do you want to start first with the distinction between sort of hardware, infrastructure, and app, and where are those distinctions?
Classical computers that you have it on. You have classical computing right now on your phones, on your laptops, or whatever. So everything that's built on top of that, the AI included, can be done to an extent, right? So like the types of information that you want to upload and essentially get it really quickly, that definitely can't happen right now. But essentially, like as it relates to IP, that is definitely a question that everyone is talking about, and everyone is having conversations about. In quantum, it's really difficult because literally there are just not enough in the workforce to even understand what we're actually doing. And so we actually don't, I don't want to say we don't have this problem, it's just not as prevalent right now, and it's only because it doesn't exist yet or whatever, but I don't know, I feel like it's better to you guys.
I think that kind of goes back to our earlier point of needing to take precautions.
Oh, agreed.
So even though you don't have to deal with it now, it will more than likely be something you have to deal with later on.
Agreed.
So what
For sure.
steps are we taking to kind of protect any of that copyright?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like it is still, the AI needs our information. It needs the things that we produce. But if someone were to take my thing, then I could sue that person. I wouldn't because whatever. But I can't sue an AI language model.
And that comes down to the regulation part, right? So the reason why like governments are kind of getting involved, like there was a time when, general data protection regulation in Europe, that was a big thing because in the end, it wasn't about if you were going to get hacked, it was when you were going to get hacked and what is the incidence response for various different companies, informing those who were going to get breached or experience a data breach and what they were going to do about it. And that limited liability. It also created accountability for certain companies. Certain companies got fined a lot. And I feel like that may be something that we're going to start seeing in AI, mostly because you need to create like a blueprint, right? Like how did we actually come to this answer? The challenge with quantum computing right now, it's all based on specific certain data sets, specific type of algorithms. And the challenge is it is very much a black box because it is quantum and
it is literally
it kind of all just happens, right? And it just ends up but there are a lot of people working on this. So just know that is something that we are all thinking about.
So we're going to throw this last question to our panelists. So just quickly, in 30 seconds, biggest disruption from AI to your specific industry, your specific company in the next 10 years? Biggest disruption, Anna.
To me, it's building this digital copy of your brain and being able to really, which is very hard to do. I don't know if we'll get there, to be able to simulate how your brain will respond to different treatments, wherever it is, on the cloud before you give a patient anything. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. David.
Yeah, I think on the consumer product side of things, it's going to completely change how we find products, how we interact with products, how we purchase products, and how good the products are. I think the bar right now is like we have a lot of stuff that don't really work. So I think using AI, we're going to be able to find a lot better stuff.
Okay. Michelle, biggest disruption in the next 10 years for you?
Building better adjacent technology tools to quantum technology. So like better lasers for stabilizing qubits, better, various different applications or whatever. I feel like that's something that needs to happen, and that'll be awesome if we see that in the next 10 years.
Okay.
Rigo, biggest disruption to your.
Yeah, well, to our industry is we're already applying different AI tools in different parts of CIC around the globe, and we actually have a session. What we said is let's have a whole company get together to just discuss how are people using it in different departments, and then do we need to set some guidelines. But more importantly for us, for CIC, is about the companies that we support. So we'll figure out different ways to support you in your entrepreneurial path, also with AI. So before we wrap up, because we have an amazing, this is probably the biggest audience we've had in this room, which is fantastic. Let me just tell you quickly what's going to happen. One, very calmly, I'm going to ask you to stand up here with me, our panelists. Linda, come here. I'm going to take a selfie with all of you. Before we thank all our panelists, and then I'm going to stand over here because it's the other side.
With the audience.
Other side. There you go. And then we're gonna give them a big round of applause, and then kill it. And then I'm gonna tell you about what's gonna happen for the next hour for all of you. So I'm gonna go down here so that you can all see. And please thank our panelists. So this is part of Venture Cafe. There's a whole new hour now happening. So some of us will go to the main room. The terrace is open. Grab a glass of wine, grab a beer, connect, keep on the discussions. This is what we're all about, both at CIC and Venture Cafe for the next hour. Now, in about 10 minutes or so, there's another session that is going to happen in this that is more of an application side to AI. Basically, for those of you interested, how to go to market strategy leveraging AI. It's a little bit more of a hands-on application conversation. Thank you everybody for coming, and you're welcome every Thursday, Venture Cafe, and of course, you're always welcome at CSE. Thank you.